What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk to you about Lucid. I want to go over some of the data points, what moved it today, and go over everything else that you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So Lucid did ultimately go down 0.82%, which was rather unfortunate because 1168 was the high. So at its peak, it was up roughly around 6.15%. Unfortunately, the broader market did start to kind of take it down. And at the same time, we did have fairly low volume. So we did have about 10 million shares being traded, but most of that was Powell onwards, if that kind of makes sense. But nonetheless, Lucid did have some pretty good momentum first thing. Aside from that, though, on a macro standpoint, we did have a couple data points. So we had mortgage applications, mortgage market index that came out before the market opened. That wasn't the greatest, but it didn't really move the market all that much. In fact, during the pre-market, things were looking pretty a-okay that we were going to see a nice kind of recovery today. Unfortunately, it looked like in many cases it was more of a bull trap, but there was a lot of fear associated to the Fed interest rate decision. So ultimately, they didn't raise or cut. They didn't do anything. But what Powell said afterwards kind of spooked to the broader market. So he ultimately came out, and I'm, of course, just shortening it quite significantly, but he's basically saying that because of the data coming in on point lately, such as inflationary data as well as labor, he kind of mentioned it was stagnant. So in general, because of that, we don't need to cut rates. So this is why we did have now the likelihood of a March cut go down to 13.5%. So this is why the broader market kind of sold off, because it's always forward looking. It wants a good catalyst to focus on. And luckily enough, it's always fixated on interest rates. So we'll have to kind of wait and see from now until March the 18th. A lot of things could change. And honestly, I wouldn't really rule it off the table just yet, but of course, that's what happens in the broader market. Aside from that, though, there really wasn't that much in news from Lucid. So no press releases, no SEC filings. The market was clearly still hyped up first thing about Lucid announcing their upcoming investor day. And that caused a lot of institutions to buy Lucid up. So that's kind of got it out of the slump it was on. Even though it closed in the red today, I feel like it's still not down and out just yet. One thing that I did notice, though, even though we haven't had that much in new analyst ratings, analysts can always change estimates without changing their official rating. And I've noticed that there has been some changes. So going into the upcoming earnings, which is on February the 24th after hours, earnings per share, negative $2.63. And the revenue is $473.08 million. That has gone up from $468. So some analysts changed it, becoming a little bit more optimistic based on the upcoming earnings. Earnings per share over the last 90 days, the revisions, there has been 1 positive and 3 negative. So analysts are still somewhat cautious, but one thing that we're seeing at least move higher after hours today is Tesla. So Tesla's up 3.29%, even though they did miss on their revenue. They had better than anticipated margins. That's always been a kind of a concern for Lucid. How is all of these tariffs really going to impact Lucid? So in general, if Lucid comes out and their margins similarly are good and they give good future guidance, then yeah, similar price action could occur with Lucid. But one thing I do want to share with you, though, this $473.08 million, that is the highest ever that has happened, even the highest estimate. So Q3 $349.52 million came in at 336. So 336 is the highest amount of revenue they've ever earned in one quarter. So if Lucid is able to come anywhere remotely close to that, then in theory, at least they're moving in the right direction. And in general, even if you kind of look here, they are slowly but surely moving in the right direction. So compared to the last quarter, if it comes in comparing to 336, that is a 40% increase in revenue. So again, Lucid really needs to hit a home run with their future guidance, but revenue, if they continue this path, then yeah, big things might be coming ultimately. But aside from that, looking at shorts, they did increase about 83,000 shares. Nothing too crazy. 34.3% of the free floats being shorted, works to be 44.7 million shares overall are being shorted. So DTC is starting to inch down a little bit. Nothing too significant in my opinion, but 5.54 days still does signal that shorts are relatively overextended. Short score 85.26, higher the number, the higher the likelihood of a squeeze happening. So let me know your viewpoint on that in the comments below. Aside from that, looking at the options, we did have 3.5 million in calls, 11 million in puts. 69% of all the options being done were bearish in nature. So that was kind of odd, especially given everything. And between 11:25 and 11:30, there was $10.3 million in premiums. So if we pop this open right here, sort it based on premiums, it looks like it was a multi-leg transaction, several in fact, and you can tell that based on the timestamps, but it looks like they were more oriented towards bearish. So it looks like this grouping right here was just very focused on bearish. These ones, these three were very focused on bullish. So it looks like they were kind of doing something, but again, more oriented towards bearish. It looks like there was a $15 put that was purchased. February 20th is expiry date, and that was about $4.7 million in the premium right there. They also did buy a $12 put that was $2.6 million. So it looks like ultimately big money is kind of assuming that there's going to be a little bit more downside based on all of that. So let me know your viewpoint on that in the comments below. Aside from that, from a bull standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around 11 to 11.50. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 10.50. On the secondary market, you did have some institutions selling out today, probably because of Powell fear, and even after hours today, we have Microsoft, Meta, and also Tesla. I do believe Meta hit a home run, similar to, I wouldn't say Tesla's home run, or theirs earnings was a home run, but at least they did improve on margins and whatever. But nonetheless, a lot of institutions were kind of selling. So the big ones for today, 5.8 million, 1.6 on the dark pool. These are some of the big ones right here. So 5.5 million, 2.8 is a little bit harder to distinguish what is buys and sells on the dark pool because it's supposed to be anonymous. But one big one right here, 500,000. If we kind of match it with what happened on the price at the time, it was a sell, unfortunately. So let me know your viewpoint on that. With it right now at 1091, it is exactly on this pivot. So 1091 is going to be a key point to watch for tomorrow, whether we're able to close above it or below. Tomorrow, we don't really have that much. We have a lot of big companies unveiling their earnings, but we don't have that much in macro data. So we have initial jobless claims and a couple of manufacturing data points, but nothing too significant in my opinion. So tomorrow, just watch for that 1091, and then flip side, 1192 for whatever reason, is if Lucid can somehow put out news and move there, that's going to be the next strong resistance. I'm looking at the 1-day chart, and given Lucid's volatility, this is why you see some pretty wide gaps. But nonetheless, getting back to the actual chart itself, so Lucid still is above that 10-day moving average despite it closing in the red today. So that's, again, something good, showing that we're building up a little bit of momentum, breaking off of kind of these lows of about 5 million. And that's kind of chump change. But one big thing for Lucid has always been that 50-day moving average, this blue line. So Lucid really does want to move higher, and possibly with maybe some good data tomorrow, Tesla earnings, that might hype up institutions to really start buying up EVs, and maybe enough so that Lucid can test this 50-day moving average. So that's sitting at 1189, so that's going to be a very big deal for Lucid, because if it can close above that for 2 consecutive days, historically we've seen some very nice price action. Typically it's about 30%, but of course every time is a little bit different. But nonetheless, I think Lucid could really be testing this 50-day moving average sooner rather than later. So let me know your viewpoint on that. And then market position, you do have not that much in willing buyers, but based on what has happened over the last couple of trading days, a lot of sellers withdrew their ask. And so that's kind of a good thing. Maybe institutions do see a little bit more upside, or maybe they're just repositioning or something along those lines. But nonetheless, like I said, I think Lucid does definitely have a good opportunity to really move higher. There hasn't been any new official analyst ratings. As I mentioned, analysts have been changing some of their estimates, not official ratings, but once Lucid does put out their earnings, then we'll have a rush of probably about 5, 6, 7 even new analyst ratings. Aside from that, nothing really crazy for any kind of articles. It'd be very advantageous if Jim Cramer was to come out again and just say Lucid is like bearish and don't buy it and blah blah blah. Inverse might really push Lucid higher because of that, but hopefully we do see a nice little bit of a recovery leading into the investor day. So let me know your viewpoint on Lucid. Did you buy? Did you sell? Do you think Tesla's earnings is going to be enough to really help Lucid and push it higher, or do you think that the market's going to kind of continue to sell off given what Powell mentioned? Because historically, every time the following day Powell doesn't cut rates and he's somewhat not the most optimistic, it usually does affect the following day as well, because the market will be digesting what does life mean without a March cut. And unfortunately, the Wall Street is very just, even though they like to say institutions aren't emotional, they definitely are, and they will throw a little bit of a temper tantrum that we won't be getting a March cut, or at least in the eyes of them right now. So let me know your viewpoint. One final thing, if you're looking for some solid buy signals, pop over to my Patreon. I put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades, worthwhile to pop over there and check that out. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.